Hey, fourth graders, you have used this place value chart so many times that this is absolutely no problem for you to read. You know that it's 1,111, even though it's kind of a funny looking number, isn't it? But you can read it, no problem. What you might not know is that all the whole numbers you've ever read since you've been able to read numbers have had a decimal point when we're finished with that whole number, right? We're finished saying the whole number. 1,111 ones. That's what we have, right? And we know that it's 10 times, you need 10 ones to make a 10. You need 10 tens to make 100. You need 10 hundreds to make 1,000, and so on. We know that the amounts get 10 times greater. Whatever unit you're working with gets 10 times greater. And in this case, let's say it's a $1 bill. So you have 1,111 $1 bills, don't you? But they've always had a decimal there because these were all whole numbers that we've been working with. But on this side of the decimal, you've got your fractional amounts. Let's think about money for a second. So if this was a dollar amount, with a decimal amount as well, $1,111.11, right? So this is not a whole dollar, is it? We're working with the units, we're working with the dollars. That's one part of a dollar. That's a fraction of a dollar. That's not a whole dollar. It's a dime, right? When we think about money, we think about dimes and pennies. Well, how many dimes does it take to make $1? 10. So we could say that a dime is 1/10 of a dollar. It's 10 times smaller. Well, this is a penny, right? Well, how many? It's a fraction of a dollar, right? It's not a whole dollar. It's a fractional amount of a dollar. And this is the unit we're working with. We're working with ones. So let's go ahead and say they're dollars. So this is a fraction of a dollar. How do I know what to put in the denominator? One what? Same as always, I ask, how many of this does it take to make a whole? How many of this unit would it take to make a whole? How many pennies would it take to make one whole dollar? 100. So this place value is called the tenths place, and this is called the hundredths place. And there's that nice THS at the end. So you sound like you're saying a fraction because you are. Everything on to the right of the decimal point are fractional amounts. And guess what? Same pattern. They're getting 10 times smaller as they move to the right, and the amounts are getting 10 times greater as you move to the left. How many pennies does it take to make a dime? 10. How many dimes does it take to make a dollar? 10. How many dollars does it take to make $10? 10. So you can see the pattern just continuing, the one that we have been used to. Well, let's go ahead and learn how to read decimal amounts. And knowing the place value names is going to be super important, and knowing what the unit is you're working with. And let's just keep with dollars for a minute. If you had this much, you would say 25 cents probably, right? If you're thinking dollars. But how much of I know it's not a whole dollar. What fraction of a dollar is it? We would say it's 25 hundredths. And I'll know what to name the decimal, what unit to give the decimal amount by where the number ends. 25 what? Hundredths. It's kind of landing in the hundredths place, right? So if you know the names of the place value places, you'll know how to read any decimal that comes your way. What if we just had that? I would read that 5/10. Or 50 cents, right? It's half of a dollar. 5/10. Whoa, yes. 5/10 is half of a dollar. In this case, half of the unit that we're working with. Lastly, let's try this kind. What if we see that? We would read that 4. I'd just read the number 4, and wherever it lands, that's the place value name or the unit that I'd give it. 4 hundredths, right? 4 hundredths. That's just like 4 pennies. Well, now the units that we work with don't always have to be money, of course. it could be, let's go ahead and work with some miles. So the unit we're working with is miles. So this would be 1 mile, right? So if I was going to read this whole amount, I would read 1 mile and 4/10. So when I get to if I have whole numbers and fractional or decimal amounts, I would read, when I hit the decimal, I say and. Just like in a mixed number, when you have a whole number amount and a fractional amount, you'd say 2 and 2/10. This would be 1 and 400. So I've got whole number and fractional amounts. And we're recording these fractional amounts with decimals. And we'll come to see that it's super convenient and super easy and clear when we use decimals this way. So actually, I want to see if you've ever seen this bumper sticker around town driving as you're driving around. And it's an oval like that, a white oval with black outline, and it has that decimal amount in it. And I'll give you a hint. These are referring to the unit they're working with are miles. So that's going to be total miles. Let's first I'll read it. We would read this 26 and 2/10 of a mile. Does anyone know what that means? Well, these people are trying to tell you that they or someone in the car or someone in their family has run a marathon, because a marathon is 26 whole miles and then 2/10 of an additional mile. Isn't that an odd amount for a race? Can you imagine having run 26 miles and then you have to run another 2/10 of a mile to get to the finish line? Well, this is the mileage that is based on a story in history in Greece when there was a victory in one part of the land and the other, and someone ran 26 and 2/10 of a mile to get to the other location to tell the people that there was victory. And so they modeled it on that. That's the story, at least. What about this bumper sticker? Let's see if you can tell what these people are trying to communicate to you. Oops, not a tool. All right, what do you think they're trying to communicate to you? It's the unit or the item we're working with are miles, and they're describing an amount of miles. It's half a marathon. This is how far you would run if you're in half a marathon, 13 whole miles and 1/10 of an additional mile. So today we're going to be practicing just reading decimal amounts, getting used to that. And you're going to hear yourself say, it's going to sound like you're saying fractions, right? When you read these, if this was an 1 and 84 hundredths. When I read decimals, I can hear fractions, fractional amounts. And we'll go on to learn about the relationship between decimals and fractions. But for now, let's start practicing to read some decimal amounts with your teaching coach.